Back on the main floor, the Hulk was sitting in the living room, a book in his hands, a tiny pair of reading glasses perched on his flat nose. Said Daniel, not sure whether addressing him as Hulk would be unbelievably rude or unbelievably stupid or just unbelievable. Fortunately, the Hulk looked up at him, eyebrows raised. Alan wants to talk to you. Said the Hulk. He closed his book, laid the reading glasses on top of it, and drifted away like a ship into the mist. When the basement door had closed behind him, Daniel padded over to see what he'd been reading, mostly to keep his mind off of what had happened in the basement. Tiny Worlds, a tourist's guide to the main belt, was lying on the chair, the Hulk's reading glasses lying on top of it. It had an artist's rendition of a field of asteroids on the cover, complete with at least a dozen asteroids, a cloud of sparkling blue dust, and a huge, bright sun. Daniel had seen actual photographs taken from the main belt. It looked nothing like that. You could never, ever see more than one asteroid in the image. There was no scintillating dust. The sun was tiny, distant, cold. If you could see Earth, and you couldn't always, it was a pinprick blue dot, easily lost amongst the other stars, easily confused for Sirius or Rigel unless you knew what you were looking for. The main belt was a desert, a tundra. It was not beautiful. It was cold and empty. Daniel walked away from the book and the glasses and the chair and up to the sliding glass doors, looking out at the warm, green and blue world outside, the honey golden sunlight and the lizard skin bark of the pines. As he stood still, listening to the bird song, he became aware of another sound. Voices from underneath the floorboards. At first he couldn't make out the words, but the voices grew louder, and soon he couldn't help but overhear. "Immensely stupid," Alan was saying. "You know what they're capable of." The Hulk rumbled something in response. "That's not an excuse," Alan snapped. "Hell, that's not even a reason. Why are you being so goddamn obstinate about this?" "'Cause you won't listen," the Hulk retorted. "I did listen. I have listened. And then, after listening, I decided that it was an immensely stupid idea and was going to get him killed." "Didn't, though." "And that makes it all right? Listen to yourself, Dylan. This is crazy." "It's necessary," the Hulk snapped. His voice was like an earthquake. "They can help us. They've offered to help us. We need all the damn help we can get." "Not from them." "You've never even met them." "I don't need to!" Alan cried. Something shattered. "Open your fucking eyes, Dylan! These people are monsters! They'd just as soon burn the whole goddamn world as catch a fucking spark! They are going to kill innocent people and they won't bat a damn eye!" "Maybe that's an acceptable sacrifice." Alan said something, very quietly. And then, after a moment, something else shattered. "Get out!" he screamed. "Get the fuck out and don't you dare come back!" There were thunderous steps, and then the door to the basement slammed open. Daniel pressed himself against the glass doors, trying to become equally transparent. Fortunately, the Hulk didn't even look at him. He stormed straight to the front door, flung it open, and thundered out into the woods. The door drifted closed after him, shutting with a quiet click. Daniel stood in silence for a moment, noticing how rapid his pulse and how shallow his breathing. Through the silence, through the open basement door, there came the sound of quiet sobbing. This is worse than a rock in a hard place, Daniel thought. This is like being caught between a chasm and a wildfire. Lacking absolutely anything else to do, stranded between the Hulk's fury and Alan's weeping, Daniel slunk off to the home theater and curled up in one of the cushy chairs, head pillowed on his hands, and pretended he was asleep. Eventually, it was hunger that drove him from his safe hiding place in the theater. The Hulk still hadn't come back, but then again, he moved so quietly it was entirely possible he'd been in the house for hours and Daniel simply hadn't heard him. And there had been not a peep from Alan. Daniel wondered, as he lay curled up in the dark and the smell of new upholstery, whether Minami was going to kill him when he got back for the simple fact that he hadn't answered his phone for 2 days. He wondered who else was going to kill him, and for what else. After a few hours, he wondered if there was anything in the house to eat, and stiffly got up out of the cushy chair to stagger off to the kitchen. He rooted around in the cupboards for a little while, finding mostly cooking ingredients and little pre-prepared food. He'd only been at it for a few minutes when he heard Alan call from the basement. "Dylan?" he queried. His voice was timorous. "Just me. Sorry," Daniel called back. He hesitated, then slowly made his way down into the basement. The room was a wreck, and so was Alan. There was broken glass on the floor, sparkling under the fluorescent lights, a minefield for anyone with bare feet. Alan's hair was a mess, his eyes red from crying, blood drying on his white sheets. "Hey, Daniel," he said, smiling weakly. Daniel looked around wide-eyed. "What happened?" he asked. Alan shrugged. His voice was hoarse when he said, "Oh, not much. I'm an idiot." A couple of tears slipped from his eyes and trailed down his face, and he chuckled humorlessly, wiping them away with the back of his hand. "Sorry you had to be here for this." "It's fine," Daniel said. Are you okay?" "Me? No. I kicked my husband out of our house and now he's not going to come back. I'm about as far from okay as possible." Daniel picked at his fingernails, unsure of what to say. "Listen, Alan, he'll come back," he said. "It's just a fight, right? They happen all the time." Alan let out a sob. "Yeah, all the time," he said. "Which is why this time he's not going to come back." "No, that's not what I meant," Daniel said, trailing off. He sighed, hanging his head. He wanted to promise Alan that things would be fine, but, well, he didn't know that, did he? Look, he just sort of walked off into the woods, okay? He'll have to come back here sooner or later, right? So just, You know, don't worry about it so much. Alan sniffled. Yeah, easy for you to say, he said. Yeah, I know. But beating yourself up about it isn't going to help. I know, Alan admitted, but it passes the time. Alan? Got it in one. I hate to change the topic, but I'd love for you to change the topic, Gonzo. Oh, okay. When do you think I'll be able to go home? Alan chewed his lip for a moment, carefully regarding his hands in his lap. Probably tonight, if you want to. Daniel raised his eyebrows. Really? He asked. Why? What changed? Looking up at him, Alan asked, "So you ready for this? Might take some explaining about Thursday night." Daniel took a deep breath. He really did want to go home, but he sure as hell wouldn't feel safe doing it if he didn't have reasons to. Ready as I'll ever be, he said. Okay. I don't think they'll try to kill you anymore. Really? Daniel said, his heart leaping. Why not? Because I don't think your account of what happened got very far into the system. I don't think anybody high enough up to do anything about it is ever going to hear the full details of what happened. I think that someone will have tampered with your statement in one way or another so that the guys who did it aren't in any danger whatsoever of being caught. Problem solved, and they have the added bonus of not starting up a messy murder investigation. His heart plunged again, right down into his boots. But how? How could they have... One of the keepers recorded it right into his ear implant. Yeah, it has to get out of his head somehow. Probably uploaded to the keeper databanks for transcription and analysis. But it'd still be with the keepers. How could someone have gotten to it there without anyone noticing? I mean, nothing's perfect, but their security is impeccable. They'd notice a break-in, even a hack-in. If anything, it'd make them more likely to investigate, knowing someone was trying to tamper with evidence. Alan shook his head. You sure you want to hear this, kid? I'm not going to believe it's safe to go home until I do. All right. I'm pretty sure the guys who took you were keepers. He tried to keep himself under control, tried not to think about what that might mean. How do you know? He asked, voice strained. The car, primarily. It fits everything together nicely. It's possible for any citizen to have handcuffs. They're into that sort of thing. But the people most likely to have them are keepers. It's possible for an ordinary... Well, I say ordinary, but you know what I mean. An ordinary citizen to have a gun, but the people most likely to be carrying guns are, again, keepers. It's possible for someone else to find out where you live, but it would be easiest for a keeper. It would be possible, just possible, for someone outside of the government to know about 9441. But highly, highly unlikely. And then I hear from my informant that your kidnappers stuffed you into a keeper car, and, well, it's starting to look pretty damning. Nobody would think twice about a couple of keepers pulling an unconscious 20-something out of their car and giving him a hoist to his house. They just think you were drunk off your ass and couldn't get back on your own. The thing I can't figure out is why they didn't want you to know they were keepers. Why they didn't use the system against you. Let's face it, anybody who knows that much about you would be able to get you into an interrogation room for something. But they didn't. I can't figure out why. Not exactly legal, Daniel said, lightheaded. Oh, true, but when's that ever stopped the Keeper? Stop talking about them like that, Daniel snapped. You don't know anything about them. Au contraire, mon frère, I know everything about them. I was them. Stunned, Daniel said, You were a peacekeeper? Is that so difficult to believe? But you're... you. I am indeed me, and me was a peacekeeper in a past iteration. I moved on from that, though. Didn't like it terribly much. Daniel tried to picture Alan in the staunch white uniforms of the peacekeepers, with a gun and a stun stick on his hip. It didn't work very well. But you break the law. A lot. I do. Because the law is stupid. Because I've seen the kind of people who live by the law, and I hate them. He paused, and then said in a tone darker than midnight, Because the law framed my sister, and then killed her, and I had to sit back and let it happen. Because that was the law. The law said she was guilty, and the law sent her to Vesta, and the law, he spat, murdered my sister. And I was part of that law. I was part of the monster that murdered my baby sister and called it an accident. He looked over at Daniel and perhaps noticed that he'd said more than he'd intended. The smirk tugged at his mouth like a fishhook, and his voice took on its usual sarcastic indifference. Needless to say, I didn't stick around very long after that. Vesta, Daniel blurted. Internally he flinched at his lack of tact, but Alan either didn't mind or acted like he didn't. Yes, he said. Vesta. What about it? That's where they sent my father, Daniel said. Vesta? Minami said her brother wound up on Vesta, didn't she? That's right, Alan said, some kind of dawn spreading over his face. And Bayani, I think he got sent to Vesta too. He looked over at Daniel. This is something. I'd bet anything Cassidy went to Vesta before she died too. Just one more thing pointing to foul play. Not just that, Alan corrected sharply. Gonzo, if we know where they went, we can find out what happened to them. We can find out if there are others who might still be alive. His eyes were sparkling. Daniel, we could save them. Daniel's eyes went wide, and he took a deep breath. You think there might be others? I'm almost certain of it, kid. Or if there aren't, there will be. His eyes narrowed in some kind of sardonic mirth. Possibly us. Now that was a troublesome thought. You weren't kidding, were you? Daniel said, when you said we'd get shipped off to the mines if we got caught. Yeah, no, I wasn't, Alan confirmed. Minami doesn't like to believe it. I don't think any of them do, but that's the truth, and somewhere in their deluded little hearts they know it. Point is, Gonzo, this Vesta thing is big. Big enough that I think we can take it to Annika. Big enough that it's definitely worth looking into. Daniel nodded slowly. But it'll be dangerous, won't it? Oh, absolutely. He winked. Don't get caught. I'm not going to do it. Oh, well, then tell me not to get caught. His heart sank, splashing into a heavy pool of dread in his stomach. Oh, God, he murmured, rubbing his face. She's gonna kill me when I get back. Oof, I hope not. Took a long time to get you on board, Gonzo. Hate to lose you. Although the brain's proving himself pretty useful. He might be able to fill in for you if you get killed. That's not funny, Daniel snapped, glaring at Alan. I'm not kidding, Alan replied evenly. Listen, kid, I like you. I really do. And if you get killed, I promise I'll be real busted up about it. But it's not going to stop me from finding out who murdered my sister, and why, and as soon as possible. The brain knows as much about it as you do, even if he isn't directly involved, and I'm pretty damn sure he'd help if I asked him to. He's a smart kid, but he's an idiot. Oh, Daniel said faintly, something cold and heavy clenched in his chest. But hey, Gonzo? Alan continued softly. Don't die. Okay? I'd really prefer not to bury you, too. He felt like he should have been comforted by that, but he wasn't. He felt useless, replaceable, unimportant. That hurt. Yeah, sure, he grumbled, waving away the remark. I mean it, Daniel, Alan insisted. We just got this thing moving, and damn if it hasn't all been because of you. Sorry it meant you getting roughed up, but hell, it's better than sitting around doing nothing for another 3 years. 3 years? Was that how long Alan had been chasing ghosts and finding nothing? No wonder he was so excited to finally be making progress. I'm glad I could help, Daniel commented lamely. Alan shook his head and sighed. Sorry, Gonzo. Didn't mean to get all maudlin on you. It's been a rough day, what with the everything and all. Look, if you want to head home, you can take Dylan's car. We'll go pick it up from the station later. I'd offer you mine, but it's kind of full of blood. I think I'd like that, yeah, he admitted. I should definitely, get back. Let Minami know I'm okay. He winced. Apologized for being a dick to her. A wise decision, Alan agreed, nodding sagely. You know how to drive? Daniel made a face. Sort of. It's not hard. And it's not like there's much for you to run into. Keys are in the bowl by the door. I'll come check up on you when I'm ambulatory again, alright? And if you need anything in the meantime, well, I could give you a number to call if you want. You trust me enough to give me your number? You, Mr. Paranoia. Alan snorted. I didn't say my number, he retorted, although he was grinning. Anyway, I've got about 50 burner phones I've been meaning to use up. They go bad after a while, He managed to laugh and continued to banter back and forth with Alan while the man scribbled down a number on a piece of paper, which evidently was one of the many things he hoarded for possible apocalyptic scenarios. He said goodbye to Alan, changed into his freshly cleaned shirt in the laundry room, and scooped up the keys from the bowl by the door. See you, Alan, Daniel called, standing on the threshold with the door open. Later, Gonzo, Alan returned, his voice coming up faint from the basement. Daniel shut the door behind himself, and headed homeward.